Let's do it! Let's add a custom mob to our Minecraft mod. More in-depth topics for Minecraft modding available in the 121 modding courses linked below, covering writable and tameable entities, custom entity armor, and even custom entity inventories, among many more awesome topics. Alright, first I'm back and tell you once more, and in this tutorial we're going to be adding a custom mob, or as it is known inside of the code, a custom entity to our Minecraft mod. Now this is going to be, as you can clearly tell by the length of this video, a very extensive process because, well, it just requires a lot of different steps basically to go through, and hopefully after this tutorial is done, you will have understood how to add an entity. You've probably then added the entity that I'm going to show you, and then hopefully you can then go on and make your own entities as well. The first thing you'll need for an entity is a custom model. Now we luckily have this due to my community being absolutely ridiculous. So basically all of the entities that we're going to see in all of the tutorials that have all been done by the community, absolutely freaking fantastic, amazing work. It is absolutely amazing. And listen, if you're a little bit entomophobic, you fear insects, I'm sorry, it's a giant freaking mantis, okay? It is what it is. But it is also pretty freaking cool, okay? We're gonna add this giant freaking mantis to Minecraft. It's going to have two different colors even, which is actually also pretty freaking cool. And the idea here being is that you can see that it also has some animations over here. It actually has a lot of animations. There's an idle animation, nothing too crazy. There's even a walking animation, which looks so freaking cool. Like, come on, right? There's an attack animation. There's a jumping animation over here where all of a sudden the wings come out. There's an ascent animation here, a falling animation, and a landing animation. Now, we're only going to add the idle and the walk animation, but the other ones are in theory available to you. So if you want to go absolutely nuts, you basically can. There you go. The Blockbench file of this model will be available to you in the description below for download, as will basically be Blockbench, like the actual program that we need. I'll link that too. And then we'll start by exporting some things. And the things that we want to export is the basic model over here as a Java file, the animations as a text file, and then the textures over here. So under file, we first of all want to go to project and make sure that the export version right here is set to Fabric 1.17. Actually, Yarn. I actually want to put this to Yarn over here. Then we are sure that this is definitely going to be correct. We're going to hit confirm, and there we go. Then we're going to go to File, Export, Export Java Entity. Now, this is going to be the mantis.java over here. That's going to be fine. We're going to save this. And then we want to go to File, and we want to go to Plugins, making sure we have under Available. We want to basically search for the Animation to Java Converter. You will basically need this. I think you might also need the Fabric modded entity. This could be a thing that you might want to have as well. So just keep that in mind. But basically, the animation one is definitely needed for the animate. And then when you have that installed, you can go to File, Export, and Export Animations to Java. We will want to choose Yarn. Hit confirm, and then we can basically do Mantis Anim or something like that. That's going to be fine. Don't worry, by the way, when it comes to the plugin that this is deprecated. That just means there are like a couple of things that we want to, or we need to change in the actual code and stuff, but everything should, hopefully work. Basically, that's the idea. Everything should work, so we should be good to go. To export the textures, we want to right-click and save as, and then this is the mantis PNG, and then this one, the same thing, save as mantis_orchid PNG, and those will also be available to you, although we were only going to add one color for now, the different variants. We're going to see that in the next tutorial, actually. And then we can proceed inside of IntelliJ with the code. So under Kaupenjoe tutorial mod, we're going to make a new package called entity. Inside of there, we'll need two new packages. The first one is the custom package, and the second one is going to be the client package. Now, inside of the entity package itself, we're going to make the new Java class called mod entities. There we go. And then in the custom package, we're going to make the new Java class called the mantis entity. And this is also where we're going to start. The mantis entity is going to be where it's at. The entity class itself will extend from the animal entity over here. We'll hover over this to implement the two methods we're going to need. We hover over this again, create constructor matching super, and we're going to make this public immediately. Now we're going to add a couple of things. Some of them I might copy over, some of them I will write out, but I hopefully will explain all of them, regardless of if they are copied over or whether or not they're written out. The first things we're going to have is an idle animation, so an animation state. So those two things over here, there's going to be a public final animation state. You can see from entity animation state, which is called an idle animation state, and an integer idle animation timeout. Those two are needed for us to facilitate or basically display properly the idle animation. That's the whole idea, and we're gonna basically come back to those in a second when we actually implement those. Then we have a method that we need to override, which is called init goals. Now this init goals method is very, very important because this one will determine what the entity does when, well, a certain goal is valid to be executed. That's the idea. And the contents of this, I'm actually going to copy over, but then I will of course explain. So you can see that we also want to add the cauliflower over here, and you can basically see that in the first line over here, we have a goal selector that we add a certain goal to with a priority. Now the priority is that 0 would be the highest priority, meaning that the swim goal, if this is valid, will basically take priority over any other goal, right? It's going to, like, this entity is going to swim first and then do all of the rest of the stuff. That's the idea. So, you know, higher is basically, it's going to get executed later, let's say. And then, of course, there's a couple of other goals, right? The animal mate goal should probably, from the name of itself, should be like, well, what is this going to do? What is the goal for an animal to mate? Well, you know, you can guess 3 times and then there you go. Anyway, there's also the tempt goal, which basically means that if I have a cauliflower inside of my hand, then this particular entity is going to follow me with an increased speed as well, which is very interesting here. So you can even change the speed at which this entity will then move. We also have a follow parent goal, which once again, like, this should be self-explanatory. Wander around far goal, look at entity goal, which is going to look at the player right here because we've put in a player entity class. So it's going to try to look at the player. You could also, in theory, put a different entity class in there, I'm pretty sure, as long as it's a living entity. And then you can basically, you know, have it look at other, you know, other mantises or something like that. That would also work. And then, of course, there's also a look around goal. And now one thing to mention over here, I'm pretty sure that mantises, they eat their partners or something, right? I think that there's something like that. I'm pretty sure that that's a thing, right? That does not happen when we animate like animal mate goal. However, I'm pretty sure you could in theory even do this because there is like a, this would be the breed possibly. Yes. So this would be the breed goal over here with the other entity. So in theory, you could, yeah, I'm just not saying you should. I'm just saying you could probably add that as well, but we're not going to in this instance. When it comes to goals as well, you can of course go into them. So control left click on this or middle mouse button click to go into the class itself, and then click on goal and press control H to see every single freaking goal that exists in vanilla. This is the best resource on goals that you basically have around, right? You can look at everything right here, how it works, how you implement it, and all of the different things. You can, of course, also go into the goal class itself, and you're going to have a few, well, helping comments and basically just like what do you have available there as well. Highly recommended to do so. We're going to stick with this. I, of course, also advise you to go into some of the other, you know, entity classes. So let's say, for example, the fox is always a good idea, fox entity. And we can go into here and we can, for example, see it has a lot of different goals over here, most of which are actually specifically for the fox as well, right? Avoid daylight goal. There you go, right? So there's a bunch of them, really freaking useful. I highly recommend you basically take a look at all of the vanilla stuff because that's going to give you the best sort of template on how to do certain things. The next thing to add is a public static, and that is going to be a default attribute container.builder. We're going to call this the create attributes method. Create attributes. There we go. This will return mob entity. This is the mob entity.create mob attributes. And we're going to add a couple of attributes over here. So the attributes to add are as follows. Entity attributes dot. This is going to be the generic max health. We're going to do a, let's do a 18. I think that's okay. We're going to do another add, which is going to be the, this is entity attributes again, dot, let's do the movement speed. We do need to do this. The movement speed, let's say a 0.35, something like that. I think that's okay. And then lastly, we're also going to add the attributes of the attack damage. This is why the frick not. How about that one? There we go, attack damage. Now, the attack damage, do note, this does not have an attack goal, right? So if we were to, for example, look at the, this would be the zombie entity, right? That could be interesting. Then what we will find here is that it has a zombie destroy egg. There's a look around, and at some point there's a zombie attack goal, as you can see, which is a goal selector over here, which basically attacks. Now, in theory, you could literally just use the zombie attack goal, change it up a little bit, and then you always, all of a sudden, have a mantis attack goal. You also will need a target selector for an attack goal, though, so do keep that in mind that that is a little bit different, but, you know. And then also, when it comes to the attributes, you can add, well, any and all of them to your custom entity, And there you go. That's the idea. I think what we can also do is we can also just add another one, which should be the follow range over here. Let's do 20 blocks in this case. That will be for the follow parent goal so that it knows, okay, this is how much, like how long I'm going to follow them. I'm pretty sure that this should be for the parent. It might also be for an entity that is tamed, but we're not going to do that in this case. Regardless though, these are the two, well, first things that we want, some goals and attributes, and now we can actually deal with the animations. Now for the animations, I will copy over 2 methods, but I will explain, of course, all that is going on there. There's first of all the setup animation states method, and then there is the tick method. Now from the tick method, we're basically saying, hey, if we are on the client, then I want to call the setup animation states method. So this shouldn't be too crazy over here. This is going to get called every tick. So once, or rather 20 times a second. That's the idea. And then the setup animation states method, that is where it gets interesting. If your idle animation timeout over here is 0 or lower, right, then we're resetting it to 40 and we're starting the animation over here. So basically the idea is that every 40 ticks, we're going to restart the animation. And crazily enough, the idle animation over here is exactly 2 seconds long, which would be, well, what is this? Yes, exactly 40 ticks. So that is what this basically facilitates. That's as easy as it is, and yeah. And otherwise, we're just counting down the idle animation timeout, and there we go. That is the animation. Well, inside of the entity setup, there's still a little bit of stuff that we need to do with the model for the animations to work properly, but that is the first part. And then, well, then we get to the isBreeding item and create child methods. The isBreeding item is fairly straightforward. We basically want to return a true for the item that can breed them. And I'm going to say, well, if the stack that we right-click this with is a cauliflower, then we're going to breed the mantis. Does that make a lot of sense? I mean, not particularly, but why the heck, right? I mean, you know, that's going to be fine. Now, creating a child is, as you can clearly tell, a little bit of a more involved process. So what we're going to do is we're just going to, first of all, have this return an error, right? Because, like I said, that it's a little bit more complicated because we, first of all, need to register our custom entity for this. But the rest of the class here is done. So this is literally the last thing that we need to add in order for this to work. So let's go and register our custom entity. Registering the custom entity is actually fairly straightforward. We simply want a public static void right here. I'm going to call this the register mod entities. Here we go. And we're going to once again do a tutorial mod.logger.info, not notify, but we're going to actually just do an info over here. Registering mod entities for tutorial mod.modID. And let's immediately call this in the tutorial mod constructor. So mod entities.register mod entities. And then we're going to find that the registration here, super freaking simple. It looks a little bit crazy, but it's actually pretty simple. Public static final. Is this an entity type of type mantis entity? This may be the mantis over here, equal to registry, making sure we choose net Minecraft registry. Very important to import the correct class. That register registries.entity type. And the second parameter is an identifier.of. This is going to be of tutorial mod.modID, and then the name here is obviously going to be mantis. After the first closing parenthesis, we want to use the entity type.builder, and then want to do a .create mantis entity : new, comma, spawn group. I think we can do a creature over here. After the first closing parenthesis, we want to change, or we want to call the dimensions method, where we're going to do a 1 width, and let's do a 2.5 f height, and then after the first closing parenthesis, a build, and there we have it. Our entity type is registered. The dimensions here are basically for the dimensions of the collision, sort of the collision box that this particular type of entity has. So basically 1 width and 2.5 height. We might have to change this up a little bit. It might not fully work, but for the time being, we're going to be fine with basically having this. Of course, when it comes to any of the numbers, be it the dimensions or in the entity itself, be it any of the different attributes, be it any of the different goals, you can always change those later down the line. Changing those is basically simple, and I basically always just say play around with those and learn about like what's going to happen when you change them. That's the idea. When it comes to the create child method, well, how big or how hard is it to create a child? Well, it is very, very easy, actually, at least for one of the parties. And that's going to be modentities.mantis.create, passing in the world. And look at that. That is record time. In just a couple of seconds, we've created a child. Pretty awesome. And with this, the actual entity class is done in its entirety. We've also properly registered the entity, and now we get to how is this frick being basically displayed. And all of that works in the client stuff. So in this case, in the entity client package, we're going to right-click new Java class, and we're going to make the mantis animations method. We're also going to make, which is going to be even more important, the mantis model class. Did I say mantis animations method? No, this is the class. And then lastly, one of the craziest classes, which is the mantis renderer class. There we go. The way that this is going to basically work together is that the model defines how is this mantis going to look like. The animation is going to define what the animations are going to be, and the renderer is going to display the whole thing. Now we're going to start with the animations because that is the easiest to do, and I will copy over only the two animations we're going to need. This is going to be the idle animation, as well as it should be the walking animation. Both of those should be all that we are going to need. Now this is what you have exported from Blockbench. So do keep in mind that this is what we exported from Blockbench, right? These are the two animations, and here we simply want to click on the different classes and Alt and Enter to import them, and there we go, and we can import all of them, and then there should be no errors present. Now personally, I like to rename the name of the animations. I like to have them anim underscore, then whatever the name of the actual entity is, underscore, and then whatever this is, which is a walk animation. And then for the idle one, same thing goes, right? We now have the idle animation, which is anim underscore mantis underscore idle. This is, I believe, the same thing that happens in vanilla. So if we do camel animations, I think we should be able to find, there it is actually only called walking. Fair enough. I personally like to call it like this. You don't have to, because every time basically fields can be named whatever you want. That's the idea. But that is mantis animations class done, and we can move on to the model, which is the second thing that we have exported, right? So this is once again exported from Blockbench. This was the Java file. In this case, what I want you to do is just basically copy the entirety of the contents of the class. So between the two curly brackets, and just paste it in over here. There we go. You can, of course, also double check in the description down below. Well, I mean, all of the code is going to be available there. To then do this, let's first of all do the class definition properly. So this is the mantis model, which is going to be a generic of type T, which extends the mantis entity. And then this whole thing extends the single part entity model of type T. We don't need to import anything from the class itself, or, hover over this. We only want to import the classes. Sometimes if you, go onto here and press Alt and Enter to try to import something, it doesn't work. You simply delete one of the characters, and then you can see all of a sudden, oh, of course, you meant the model part. In this case, we want to keep the mantis as well as the head, and all of the rest of the different fields we can delete. The constructor will, of course, be renamed to mantis model over here, making sure we write this properly. There we go. That is the mantis model. And then inside of it, the same thing goes, where we can simply delete all of the rest except for the mantis and the head over here. And those are also both already done correctly. The get texture model method, similar thing, right? You can see dilation doesn't exist, so I delete the N over here, and all of a sudden, oh, this dilation class, of course. I don't know why that sometimes happens. It just is what it is, right? There's a lot of things to do. I don't fault IntelliJ for that because, Minecraft modding can be quite crazy. Anyway, then the two methods which have a lot of different errors, not to worry. The first thing here in the set angles method, we changed the entity to a mantis entity, and no more errors are present here. In the render method, we import both the matrix stack as well as the vertex consumer, and the last four floating point numbers, right? These ones, the red, green, blue, and alpha, we're changing this to int color, and then passing in, instead of red, green, blue, and alpha, we simply pass in the color, and all of a sudden, no more errors are present, except for at the very top, but that's going to be fine because we can change that by simply overriding the getPart method, where we're going to return a mantis over here. There we go. Having done this, we pretty much have the basic setup for the model done. As you can clearly see, there's quite a bit of things in here, specifically the texture model data over here, which is literally just the way that this guy looks over here, right? So like each one of these different body parts just displayed inside of code. That's the whole idea, and that is literally what this is. For us to finish the mantis model, we actually want to do one or two more things. And that is, we want to make a model layer. So this is going to be inside of the mantis model as well. I think that actually makes a lot of sense. There's a public static final entity model layer, which is going to be mantis. equal to a new entity model layer, passing in an identifier.of, tutorialmod.modID. Then we're going to call this mantis over here. And then after the first closing parenthesis, another string. And we're going to call this main, because in this case, it is the main layer. We're going to need this in a bit, but for the time being, we basically are just going to keep it there. And then the rest of the model is going to have the a method copied over, which is going to be the set head angles method. This one is needed to, well, basically move the head about in the same way that the head of the entity works, right? So basically, as the head of the entity moves, and for example, it's going to look at the player, what we're also going to do is we're going to move the head right here. So we're going to take this head over here, and we're going to rotate it accordingly to wherever it basically is looking. That's the idea. That's going to be pretty neat indeed. Having done that, we have the angles over here, and that will have to be set in the set angles method itself. The first two lines I'll copy over again, and this is super freaking important. This first line right here is basically going to go through all of the model parts and reset their transforms. This is super important and very much needed. Otherwise, all of your different animations are going to be additive, meaning that they're going to be they're not going to reset. And that means that very, very strange things are going to happen. Just keep that in mind. You will always need this particular single line, then the head angles over here for the head movement, and then the two other animations, which are going to look kind of like this. This animate movement, it's just going to basically look for the walk animation. That's pretty awesome. And then a update animation for the idle animation. You can see we're actually taking the idle animation state that we're starting we're starting over there in the mantis entity, and we're combining it with the animation, the idle animation definition that we've created inside of our animations. There we go. That's the idea. And where does this all come from? I highly recommend, if you're interested in this, look at the camel model, for example, the camel entity model, and you will find that, this looks pretty similar. Oh, what is this? This looks pretty similar. Basically, the camel entity might be one of the best places to look at all of this. As you can see, idling animation state, there's an idle animation cooldown. I called it timeout. Same difference. The idea just is that, really, genuinely, if you've got enough Java knowledge, right, intermediate to advanced, let's say, I think intermediate should be fine, then you can learn all of this, like every single thing that I'm showing you right here, from vanilla. That's the idea. And that's hugely, it's actually hugely spectacular. That is a thing, and it is really freaking awesome. Luckily, though, with this, we have the model class done, and we're gonna, basically combine this with the renderer in a bit, but that simply leaves us with the renderer, which at first glance is going to look crazy, but then you'll find that the actual class itself is actually very, very straightforward. This will extend from the mob entity renderer of type mantis entity, of type mantis model of type mantis entity. This is what I said, with you probably saying this looks crazy. However, the actual class itself, not that bad. We're going to hover over this to implement the getTexture method. We're going to hover over this again, create constructor matching super, and this is where we start. We want to basically get rid of the last two parameters over here, only leaving the context. The entity model is very straightforward. It is simply a new mantis model, passing in the context.getPart, and then mantis model.mantis. This is the entity model layer that we're basically connecting to the part of the mantis model. And then right here in the F over here is the shadow radius. So this is how big the shadow is that this particular entity casts. And there we go. Let's do a 0.75 F over here. I think, roughly 75 or 0.75 is going to be okay. To get the texture, we're simply going to return an identifier.of, and this identifier is going to be tutorialmod.modID, and then under textures/mantis, actually textures/entity/mantis/mantis.png. Now, very importantly, that you do not forget the PNG here for the texture. Very important, actually. And then also this path over here, we're going to add that texture in a little bit when we get to the assets. But first, we also want to override the render method. In this case, I'm just going to copy this over because it's very, very simple. You can see when we have a baby, like when the mantis entity is a baby, we're simply going to scale it down by basically half in all directions. So it's going to be a smaller mantis. It's still not going to be a real-sized mantis. It's still going to be quite big, but there you go. That's the whole idea, and that is actually the entirety of the renderer class done. Like I said, it looks crazy, but it actually isn't too bad. And now we need to combine everything together, because right now the layer over here, the entity layer, doesn't know that it has to get the texture model data from right here, and the entity itself doesn't know that it needs to use the Mantis renderer. And both of this, or all of this, is done in the tutorial mod client class over here, where we're simply going to say entity model layer registry, that register model layers. This is going to be the mantis model dot mantis, and this is going to be combined with the mantis model : get textured model data. And then the second one is the model, the entity renderer registry. There you go. Dot register, where we're going to register mod entities dot mantis with the mantis renderer : new. And those are the two things that you'll always need when you have any sort of rendering or anything like that. This is not done everything yet, because we then also want to jump one more time to the tutorial mod class, to the onInitialize method, where we're going to use the fabric default attribute registry dot register. We're going to say mod entities dot mantis is going to use the mantis entity dot create attributes method over here to create the attributes for our mantis. That's the idea, and that is also very much needed, otherwise it's not going to work. Now, before we jump into the assets and resources, the actual entity itself is now already added. Like, we could spawn it and that would be all great. However, how would we spawn it? Yeah, of course, /summon. But what about we add a freaking spawn egg? Absolutely, that's what we're going to do. So in our mod items class, we're going to say public static final item. This is going to be the mantis spawn egg over here. In this case, spawn underscore egg equal to the register item method, mantis underscore spawn underscore egg. And this is going to be a new spawn egg item, spawn egg item. There we go. Passing in mod entities dot mantis. Then the primary color is going to be 0x9DC783. I've already basically chosen those colors. You know how the eggs always have two colors. That is basically how you define them. That is just RGB. It's nothing too crazy over here. And there we go. Of course, you can change those colors as well. But for the time being, we're going to have this spawn egg. Let's add it to the item group, because that would be fatal if I added this and then would still have to give it to myself via a command. Would be kind of defeat the purpose here in this case. And then in data gen, we also need a model for this. Now you will find that first you might say, oh, this is probably going to be a really complicated model. Luckily, it is not. I'm going to copy this over and see it is simply item model generator dot register for the mantis egg over here. And then we make a new model of an optional of item template spawn egg. And then the last one here, we're going to keep optional empty. And that is it. That is going to generate us the proper model for this. And then we can finally go on to the assets. First of all, of course, translations. I don't think I need to further explain the item translation right here. What I might have to explain is entity.tutorialMod. And this is the mantis over here, which will be gone to mantis, or which will be translated to mantis. Now, this basically is just for any type of mod that will display the names of your entities when you look at them, right? Obviously, then it makes sense to have this translated, because really it doesn't cost you anything to add this. Then the textures, well, the textures, there is only one, and that one is under textures entity. And then we want to make a new directory called mantis. And then right there, we're going to add the mantis.png, which is the one, well, the thing that we have exported over here. So this one was the exported texture from Blockbench right here. So this one, and there we freaking go. Now that we have added all of this, I'm pretty sure we should have everything we're going to need. Yes, I think so. I think that should be it. So let's go to our Minecraft client, no, data generation actually, because we first of all need to generate the data for our spawn egg. But once that is generated, well, I'll say, let's jump into the game and see if it works. All right, fans, we're back in Minecraft, and let's take a look. The mantis spawn egg is here, and I mean, come on, look at this guy. Look at this guy. That is crazy. Yeah, so, it might be, it may or may not be moving backwards. That might be a thing. So if you, okay, that is not quite what I had in mind right there, but all right. All right, so it turns out the rotation was also an issue in my pre-programmed project. I literally just did not notice it before. And you can actually see the issue sort of live inside of Blockbench as well, because the actual mantis is facing this way, even though north is this way and north is basically always forward. Now, there's a couple of ways that you could deal with this. However, the issue is that our mantis point over here, right? So this is going to be the pivot point, is not really located in a good place. For this, what we're going to do is we're going to add a new group. Now, you won't have to do any of this because all of this should already be done when you download the Blockbench file. And we're going to add this to the mantis right here. We're going to call this root. And now I should be able to rotate it around here and have nothing mess up quite, badly. And we're going to rotate it at 180 degrees. There we go. And now it should be the same thing, and everything here should still work exactly the same, as you can see, just in the correct way. Now, obviously, we need to first of all, save this again. And then secondly, we also want to go to File, Export Model again, because I need the different model. And this will change a couple of things inside of the model itself. So that is going to be the following. Inside of here, we're going to have a new texture model data. And this is extremely important, we now also have a model part root right here, right? Which is going to be the following. It is going to be literally the root is going to be called root right here. And then this is no longer via root. This now has to be this.root because, well, this is one level higher up. And at the very bottom over here, instead of the get part mantis, we also want to return root right here. And we also want to render root actually, which is, I think mantis should actually also still work for the render at least. But in this case, I think it makes the most sense to deal with this. And if we do that, all of a sudden, they are moving in the right direction. And of course, they're also, well, first of all, the animations look absolutely fantastic. Maybe, it could be changed a little bit. They could maybe even be translated a little bit. But overall, it works. If I get some cauliflower out, you can see they're going crazy. And of course, as I've said, making some children over here in seconds. And there we go. This is still a huge freaking mantis. Well, there you go. Those are custom mobs added to Minecraft. Pretty freaking neat. As per usual, all of the code is going to be available to you down below and everything you've seen here for download as well. But that's going to be it for this tutorial right here. Next time in this video, we'll talk about entity variants. Hope to see you there. So, yeah.